Hey there, this is Seth Juarez from Channel 9 coming to you live from Austin, Texas. We are here at ChefConf. And if you have questions, please tweet them at #ChefConfLive. I am looking at them as we go. I have here the Honorable.
Oh my.
The Venerable. Mr. Richard Campbell, how are you, my friend?
I'm so glad to see you, my friend.
Likewise. So
Yeah.
we were here setting up, and you showed up, and I said, what are you doing here?
Well, I'm wearing the Run As shirt, right?
Tell us about Run As.
So Run As Radio is a podcast. Started back in 2007.
You do podcasts?
I don't know if you know.
I've heard.
Yeah, a
I've
couple
heard.
here and there.
Huh?
So, back in 2007, and I've been doing at that point .NET Rocks for a couple of years with Carl, and it's just sort of a recognition that there were really no IT-oriented podcasts that talked about the Microsoft stack in any way, except maybe to make fun of it,
Right.
which is silly because, every IT department, every operations team has some Windows in their life. It's just sort of normal. It's maybe less normal today than it was back in 2007, but that was reality. And so started the show as a weekly, and I've every Wednesday since April of 2007. So,
Wow, that's quite the longevity.
480 shows or something now.
So Run As Radio is more of an IT sort
Absolutely.
of focus thing.
Yep.
So tell me about, because you play both sides.
I have. I live in both worlds.
What's the beef there between IT and dev?
Well, it's a pretty simple, straightforward thing, okay? Now, the first thing you need to understand about IT, if you've never been IT, is if I do my job perfectly, nobody can tell. I'm invisible, right?
Yeah.
And I was a good IT guy, man. I'd sit in my office, phone never rings, kind of lonely.
Right.
So I'd shut off a server. Phone rings every time.
Nice.
Hi, miss me?
Yeah, I'm still working
Yeah,
here.
let me turn that back on
Yeah,
for you.
Nice.
So, the nature of the work is reliability, right? That's how you're measured, uptime.
Yeah.
Now compare that to a developer, because a developer is about shipping new features, right? You have shipping parties. No parties for IT. Like, nothing crashed today.
Uptime party.
Let's get a beer. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
not the same
that's right,
thing, right? And so now combine those two. You're building new features, you celebrate new features as a developer, then you pass it over to operations. Operations is measured in reliability. Well, what disrupts reliability?
Changes.
New features,
Yeah.
right? So for you to be successful as a developer, you're pushing things on me that could make me less successful as an IT guy.
And so there's like this yin-yang kind
Absolutely.
of like, you're the devil, but I'm not, and then
Yeah.
the other way, I'm the devil and you're not.
Exactly.
And it feels like it's a competing sort of priority
Well,
there.
and here's the problem is, if you can't get those new features into the field and actually up and running, the company suffers. Like,
Right.
We actually need those things. So years ago, anecdotal story for
Let's do it.
I'm going to leave the names out to protect the guilty.
Of course.
I get asked to come in to interview a VP for a fairly decent sized American company. 4 divisions in this company, and this VP runs one of them. And this one VP is outperforming the rest of the company in a big way. They've got more software, they've got more customers, people are super excited. And so they asked me, as a professional storyteller, could you sort of get the story down and write it up in a way that we can help the other teams understand how this guy and his team did so much?
Right.
I'm like, awesome, it's a great gig, it's going to be good fun. Sit down, start working it out, and I discover that he's not using their IT. He's doing everything on the cloud, and he hasn't told anybody.
Oh, how do you tell that story?
Yeah.
He's not using your stuff.
Yeah, the way he got so performant is he went around you guys.
Yeah, pretty much.
And so, but it was a real eye-opener. This is in the very early days of the cloud that this went down, right? And by the way, he was also not compliant in a lot of security-related things for the organization, so it was actually a big issue. We never wrote the paper we meant to write.
Right.
We actually had a long conversation about how to, there's 2 stories to this. One is, how do we use the cloud correctly, because they had issues there, and what does this say about the way we're doing operations right now? Because operations can get into this no mindset.
Right.
And it's a trap, because it hurts everybody.
And so effectively, he was working around the IT barrier.
That's right. And IT had, IT doesn't throw up barriers because they're fun. I have metrics by uptime. I have security requirements. These are all important things. These are things that the company values, right?
Right.
But they get to the point where they're valuing it to the point where they stop innovation. And that becomes a huge deal, and suddenly you have a tiger team, you have an innovator, you have somebody who finds a way to circumvent the rules effectively.
Now I'm going to use a weird analogy, and you go with me here.
Sure.
I have found that the best board games, and we love board games at my house,
Yep.
have an interesting tension between several elements of the game that require you to really think about the choices you're making.
Right.
It feels like the IT dev sort of relationship is that.
It starts with how do we get on the same side of the problem?
Yeah.
Right? Like, that's the issue. As long as the picture I just painted for you, which is a very adversarial picture of ship my feature, no, you'll wreck my system, right? Somebody's got to grow up and say, what do I have to do, I'm coming at this from a dev perspective, to make you confident that deploying this feature is not going to harm your reliability stats?
I see.
Right? Ta-da, QA appears, right? Testing appears. But typically testing is often driven by development, and so we're not doing tests for reliability, we're doing tests for functionality.
Oh, so in essence what we need to do is we need to, while we're developing, as a developer, is optimize for their success while we're optimizing for ours.
So I would have this meeting, right? When I brought in as the firefighter, this company's having problems, we're having a tough time shipping software, things are taking too long, da-da-da-da-da. And so you have this meeting where you have a couple of dev guys, probably fairly senior, a couple of ops guys, fairly senior, and I called it the IQ test, right? We're gonna have an IQ test, and I want everybody to bring stuff to the table, right? And so one of the things I would ask the typically website guys is we bring the web config file, ASP.NET web config file.
Right.
Just all of these things in there, because the web config file was set up by development.
Of course.
But it directly affects operations.
Yeah, of course.
So we go through that thing line by line, explaining it to the operations guys. Because this is where security profiles are actually set up. Oh, we're storing passwords in clear text in a database. That's not bad.
No, not at all.
And how we do load balancing is in there. The connection strings for data stores are in there. Like, all that stuff's in there, directly affects operations. And you really want operations to own it. What happened when we went through the file is you start having a conversation about where code intersects infrastructure.
Right.
Now, what do I ask the IT guys to do? Bring me a network diagram, right? Because the average web dev thinks browser, internet, web server, database, which means he's consolidated the IT guy's job to 2 lines. You wonder why they're grumpy.
Yeah, right.
You know, in behind all those lines are firewalls and load balancers and IMAP servers, all these other pieces, a disaster recovery site. All things would actually affect the way you should build your software.
Yeah, of course.
So if you actually, as a dev guy, start understanding how the operational infrastructure actually runs, it changes the way you think about features.
Like, as a .NET guy, like, if you're maintaining session state and memory and you just load balance these things, the IT guy is going to laugh at us.
Well, and the funny part is, what happens when you get that wrong, okay? We're doing round robin load balancing against 2 servers that are maintaining session state in the server, okay? Is the app going to crash? Probably not. It might get object not found. But you can fix that just by regenerating blank objects. What actually happens to the customer? Customer puts a couple of things in their shopping cart, and then the shopping cart's empty.
And then they're not logged in.
They put the third thing in the shopping cart, and the first 2 appear, and the third one disappeared. Right? And they just think your site's insane, and they file a complaint that ops has to deal with. They try and explain this to a developer who's like, "What? Cannot reproduce." Right? Like, and you've just seen a whole failure of that chain of we need sticky session, or we need to externalize state storage.
Yeah.
Right? And web config would actually pick that up, right? If you web config, you'd see that hey, this is where we're storing state. Oh, that means it's in the web server. Oh, we run an F5 and round robin load balancing. What's that going to do, right? You suddenly have that conversation.
It feels like the web config file was the very first sort of DevOps-y kind of thing that ever existed.
It was one of the most coherent intersection points of that problem, because dev invariably set it up when they built the site, right? They go file new ASP.NET project, boom, we just made a web config file with a bunch of default settings that are almost certainly wrong.
Yes.
And then they deploy with that. Now, if operations isn't familiar enough with ASP.NET to understand that file, while it looks like code, is actually instructions to operations, you're going to be in trouble, inevitably. But as teams get more experienced, and then long before the word DevOps came along, I was working with high-performing teams, right? They were often small. What's really great about 2 devs and 1 ops guy? Dinner for 3.
Yeah.
Right? You get to sit together, talk through problems, right? It naturally comes up. But as soon as it's an operations team, maybe on a different floor or in a different country, and a development team spread out at a lot of different places, like that opportunity to intersect those people together and actually think through these problems. Like that meeting I just described, that IT meeting, or the IQ meeting, should that happen before we write code?
Yeah, a long time.
Yeah.
Like, look, there's a really good dev that lives here in Austin, and anytime I have to talk about something that actually has worked somewhere, I talk to Jimmy Bogart, because that dude deploys stuff.
And you know what I like about Jimmy?
Yeah.
I really love about Jimmy? It's not just that he's smart, it's mostly that he has experience.
Yes.
Because everything's gone wrong for him that you can
Yes.
think of. When he
Yes.
explains stuff, it's like, I did this wrong, and I would save you that pain.
And the thing that he did, and this is interesting, and I think it has to do with the way you're talking about teams, is when we talk about ASP.NET MVC, you put your model, your view, and your controller in separate folders. He's like, that's stupid. You should separate it by features.
Yes.
And you'll have your view and your controller in there, maybe part of your POCO model.
Right.
You should put it there. And to me, that taught me a valuable thing, that you're actually delivering business value by folder.
Right. And,
Maybe-
also thinking about it in a sustainable way, right?
And the analogy helps me when it comes to, like, we started thinking about, well, we need to have the designer part of the dev team.
Right.
Now we should probably have the ops person as
Right.
part of the dev team.
And there's going to be more. There's going to be some QA guys. There's going to be some InfoSec guys. Like all of those roles matter in a modern site, right?
Yeah.
And every part of those goals occur in every website. It's just a question of how many of them are intentional.
And every part of those goals should exist in every feature.
Pretty much. Yeah.
And so as you're like looking at your organization, maybe you should think about, here's feature A team, here's feature B team, and you give them features. And if you have those people, like Sue Dev is in there, and Jim the designer,
Yep.
and Jenny the IT person, they should all just sort of be there in that feature.
And one of the things, again, when you get back to the no ops model, that very small startup model, all those roles are in so few people that they get to talk to each other all the time, right? That communications becomes easy. As we grow, and we need specialists, look, if you really want to understand the web security landscape, it's a full-time job.
No, it really is.
Being on top of the OWASP, being on top of current breach requirements, being on top of current updates, like you need someone to think about that all the time, which means they have a very vertical skill set that is absolutely horizontal in everything you build. And so they only have so much time to intersect with each of these projects and make a difference, an important difference. So what we can do as folks focused on a feature to facilitate the fact that our InfoSec guy is going to come and go very quickly because he's got 100 of these to deal with. You know, how do we organize? This is, you know what, big power of configuration as code is the differences between this version that I've already inspected as an InfoSec guy and this version that's new. I have less stuff to look at.
Yeah.
So it takes me less time to get through to these are our new security risks, right? You thought it was just cool and it deployed faster, but for an InfoSec guy, it's the difference between being a blocker to delivery and being a facilitator to delivery.
I see. So we started at the beginning talking about sort of perhaps the age-old animosity between IT and dev.
Right.
How is DevOps supposed to sort of smooth those wrinkles out?
Well, you know, let's think about how I described those two people at the beginning. This guy was measured, this dev guy was measured by building a new feature, and this ops guy was measured by uptime. The measurements are wrong.
Yeah.
Right? The mistake number one is putting those different requirements on those different people, right? Our goal was to deliver value to our customers. It turns out that features represent value and uptime represents value. But the thing that matters is value. So let's get a new set of measurements. You know, the way I describe this when I'm actually talking to an organization about it is like, let's figure out when we can all go to the party, right?
I see.
We always have a shipping party. Dev's usually there. Ops isn't there because they're still trying to deploy the software. So, oh, okay, well, let's wait till after they've deployed, then we'll throw the party. Wait. Did it work? Did it provide value?
I see.
Right? Further down that path is this idea of hypothesizing a feature. Before we wrote version 1 or any line of code related to this, we said, we think customers will value this. We have these measurements, we've talked to these, we've collected this data about them. This is the way we think we'll have the feature. This is what it'll do for people. Here's how it represents value.
Right.
Let us set a goalpost that represents value to the customer. This will mean, you know, I used to make websites go faster. And one of my goalposts is when we make the site go faster, more people buy and they buy more. The site's snappy, you'll put more stuff in your cart, you'll experiment more, you'll hang around my site more, you'll look at more pages, and that turns into more revenue. right?
Wow.
There's a business metric. So my metric for performance tuning was, I want to increase sales by this much percent. I want to increase the average shopping cart size by this much. These are the metrics, right? Now I need everybody in the organization to play ball on how we design a feature, how we implement a feature, how we test a feature, how we deploy that feature, how we measure it being used, and when it crosses those goalposts, everybody gets to go to the party. And we funded it with the additional revenue.
I see. And so now I think what you're saying is that the beginning of DevOps is we need to change the way we think about software delivery as a technical thing and more as a business thing.
Absolutely. If the metric you're being measured by doesn't directly relate to value to the organization in one form or another, and I'm not just talking, e-commerce is easy to do, right? Because it's revenue, right? We're making dollars. But if you're working on an internal website, that's people's time, that's salaries poured into using that app. That is a measurable value we can pull out and say, if it takes less time to do this, that actually saves the company real money. So there's a lot of different ways to get down to business value and get everybody living on that same metric. But then now we get this paradigm shift. I only make my numbers when you make your numbers, right? If you can't get that feature built, nothing for me to deploy. So I can't make my metric either. I'm keen to help you get deployed, which means I bet I'll show up to that meeting before we build the feature.
Because you're being measured on that feature.
I'm going to get measured on your ability to get that feature out there and create value to the customer, right?
I see.
So suddenly I'm like, hey, you don't need to write don't worry about writing all that authentication code. We've already got this module in place that's running in our infrastructure.
I see.
We need to keep this thing up, so the backup strategy has to work. So I need you to be able to retry data connections so that if we do fail over to the other side, it keeps working.
Right.
This is the conversation we have at the beginning of a feature, and I'm now motivated as that IT guy because my metric is your metric.
And that's interesting, right? Because traditionally, we're being measured on technical things.
Yeah, absolutely.
But not business things.
No, and the funny part is, when we do our job well as technical people, we provide this stunning value to the company.
Of course.
It's amazing how much value we can provide to the company, but we ignore that aspect of our measurement. You want to see a funny thing? When a developer and an IT guy agree on an idea for a feature and want to fund it, and I've had this happen with performance tuning, right? Where the dev is having tough times putting out new features because it just makes the site slower, and the ops guy's terrified of you slowing down the site anymore because it's costing us revenue, and they want to do a performance tuning cycle. Now look, performance tuning cycle is not a trivial thing, right? It's going to take us 3 to 6 months to really performance tune that's not out of this website, and in that time, we're not going to ship a lot of new features. And the problem with performance tuning is it doesn't look like anything.
Yeah.
Right? Because the site's faster.
Yeah.
The way I used to describe it is, it's like oxygen in the room. As long as you have oxygen, it doesn't motivate you.
Right.
If I take it out of the room, well, now you care, don't you?
We're pretty motivated.
We're pretty excited about it, actually. So, same thing with performance. As soon as we have performance, no motivation whatsoever. People remember that performance tuning cycle, that sprint where all we did was improve the performance of the website, as the sprint where you didn't ship any features. Right?
Which is sad, right?
Yeah.
Because
so now,
it is a feature.
But when operations and development are on the same side of a problem and coming to management saying, this is what we want to do, it's a very profound moment. Because that almost never happens in some organizations. Right. They're on the other, it's those guys' fault. No, it's that guy's fault, right? No, we're on the same side. This is the right thing to do. We want budget, we want time. This is what we want to work on. We think it'll provide overall value. And the way you're going to persuade that manager is with dollars, right? With his metrics or her metrics.
I see.
That's what, if you don't speak their language, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Right, the same way that a developer is never going to have a good conversation with an ops guy when they're metrics by reliability, unless you think about reliability.
Interesting.
Right? First have the conversation in their language. Next talk about how do we have the same language. Like there's stages to this, right? Like if you suddenly understand that I care about reliability, I'm a lot more comfortable talking to you, right?
Well, yeah, because you have the same sort of interest.
So let's throw a hard problem at the equation. E-commerce site. I want to do a recommendation engine. Okay? Recommendation's awesome stuff. You love machine learning.
I love machine learning.
You know what this is about. There is no lightweight, fun-filled, harmless way to build a recommendation engine. It represents serious processing overhead. It's got to be timely, right? As someone's putting stuff in the cart, I've got to be recommending new things to them. I know it's going to sell more. It's going to make money, okay? We can build a really good engine. but how much more additional compute do we need to do this?
A lot.
Like I've done, and say I've done my homework well. I know how much value it presents. I have enough money. Now we turn to operations and go, you need to provision additional servers to make this feature work. And they say, great, how many? Hey,
it's a good question.
Interesting problem. And why make them guess? That's really mean.
Yeah.
Right? We're building a feature that shows all this value, and I'm going to jeopardize your reliability because you can't predict the future. So let's take the problem on a different way. I'm going to start building this this recommendation engine. We're going to turn it off. We're going to deploy it. We're not going to show it to the customer. We're going to give a control to the operations guy so they can turn it on an individual server and measure its overhead. So it's going to start building recommendations on people doing ordering without showing it to the customer. Arguably, the only thing the customer's going to notice is the site's a bit slower.
Yeah.
Right? But we're going to run it for an hour, collect some metrics about its overhead, and from that be able to extrapolate the impact on the site. And I might come back and go, this thing's too slow right now, man. This is how many servers I need. Like, it's going to blow out the budget. There's no way we could do this. You need to tune it. Now you get to work on it some more. So now we're doing this integrate first mentality to our software. We're deploying invisible features and we're testing them in production. Now if you come at an IT guy and say, I want to test features in production, he's going to hit you.
Yeah, you're going to get some talking to.
But if I can come at you with this idea of, I want to integrate this first and measure its overhead, and you have control.
It's your button.
It's your button, you can shut it off. Now, if I'm smart as a dev, when you switch it off, it sends me a message, right? Generates a work item that says, feature was turned off at this time. So I can pick up the phone and call you back as the IT go, Luke, you've turned off your targeting computer. Is anything wrong?
Yeah.
Why did you shut it off? Because I want to know, that's important.
Yeah.
We've learned something. Oh, we're hitting towards peak traffic. I was worried about the overhead to shut it off just in case.
Oh,
right?
okay. That's a good, yeah.
You know what? It's a friendly conversation, right? Which is really powerful. But after we've had a couple of months of tweaking and tuning that, and now you know exactly how much to provision to keep it up, now think about the impact it's going to have on marketing. We roll out this cool new feature, and the website doesn't tip over.
Yeah, people have DDoS themselves so many times with the cool features.
But because we've got good measurements and we know what the overhead is, we can build in a 25% increase in load utilization.
Right.
So we know what those numbers are. We've got real data to work against it. I mean, think about how different that set of conversations were, the ones we were having at the beginning of this conversation about being adversaries. There's no way for that feature to be successful without us having this conversation.
Well, not only that, but you're giving control where control should be.
Absolutely.
For every aspect of the software development.
And you know, another angle on this is weekend firefight. So Adrian Cockcroft, the former architect of Netflix, arguably, you know, your worst case scenario for a load test, right? Where the internet's not big enough to actually load test Netflix. He's the guy who said when we started calling developers at 3 a.m., we had a lot fewer 3 a.m. crashes.
Oh, nice.
Now, let's do that a friendlier way. I found that when I plugged my developer, that when I had a developer on call for a serious failure, so that they could be part of a firefight. They could deal with the site's going weird, something strange going on. And they turned out a senior developer, somebody who really knows the system, can make a substantial contribution to a firefight like that. Not by writing code. There's no code you can write during a crisis that's going to make the situation better.
No, it's just make it
guaranteed to make it worse.
But
the way that a developer thinks about how an application operates and the way an operations person does are very different. So you can see a site in trouble and you will probably have a different intuition about what's causing that problem.
Right.
So you can help ops get to the solution first. But another thing's going to happen after you've gone through that experience. You don't know enough about what's going on with your app in production. You never know enough.
But it's good to be there to learn during
to actually feel blind, right? There's no substitute for understanding blindness without not being able to see.
So we're nearly out of time.
Yeah.
What is some advice that you have to developers and IT people to sort of embrace this? Because it feels like it's less of a technology thing and it's more of a cultural thing.
Absolutely.
What are some advice?
There's another piece. There's the trust thing.
Right.
And so the challenge is, how do we trust people at work? Or how do we build trust at work? What's the starting point? Stop having lunch with your desk mates, with your team.
Right.
Maybe once a week. Look, humans are hardwired to trust people they break bread with.
I know, it's the weirdest thing.
It's an incredibly powerful force. And for the most part, when you talk about opportunities to actually build trust in a work day, outside of spending weekends doing trust falls and climbing walls and things, it's lunch. If you're a dev, go have lunch with IT.
And if you're an organizational leader, pay for them to go to lunch once a week. I mean, can you imagine?
If you got leadership responsibilities and you don't have all your lunches planned out, you're wasting an important opportunity to make your teams better, right? And part of that is being able to make sure those teams interface with all the other teams.
Right.
So yeah, buying lunch is really important, and it's a starting point to building trust that opens the door to those conversations.
Well, this has been very educational. I have for you a pocket monkey.
Oh, very nice.
Guest of our show.
I can have the TSA take that away from me.
That's what you do. Check your bag. Well, I hate checking my bag. You know how that is.
But I appreciate that. Thank you, Seth.
Well, thanks so much for being with us. Thanks so much for talking about DevOps. And it feels like it all starts with lunch.
Lunch.
Thanks so much for watching. This is Channel 9. We are at ChefConf here in Austin, Texas. I had to think about that for a second. Scary. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you after the break. Take care.